Organ and Nation in Mexican Invasion. I am as always your host, Christopher Baldagdale, MDMA. We are Duncanville High School in the Tees, United States. And today is November 13th, 2020. And on this date in history, in I won't say the year, my sister was born on Sunday. So, I've actually lied about her age so many times. I don't know that she knows how old she is. I threw her 40th birthday party when she was 38. Because I'm a little bit evil. Happy birthday, sister. Well, starting out with this unit, the last unit before Christmas, we go into the most dangerous of wars. And this will be one fought on paper. The Third War with Great Britain. People still upset about the American Revolution. People still upset about Washington, D.C. being burned down during the War of 1812. Well, now, watch out. This one's going to be fought through books, magazines, and newspapers. A lot of people blamed Britain for the Panic of 1837. And this one's a lot less passionate. So, the United States was still in a place where we wanted to make Canada part of the United States. And things came to a mild 100-degree Fahrenheit boil when a vessel carrying supplies for revolution in Canada named the Caroline was attacked by Canadians, and the ship was burned. One American died. Americans cried out for vengeance. We want your soul. And they very nearly executed a man by the name of McLeod. But cooler Canadian heads prevailed, and war was avoided. So, sorry for everyone for that horrible twist of violence that came through, but it looks like we averted yet another war. Okay? So, good news for everyone who loves peace. Organ fever was breaking out at this time, and the United States was demanding all of Canada. And had we gotten our demands, then the Oregon Territory would have been connected to Alaska, and our maps would look a lot less convenient. Okay? And people were screaming out, 5440 or fight. 5440 or fight. 5440 or fight? There were several of those being yelled at, and Oregon was something that was being fought over between Spain, U.S., Britain, and Russia. And we had a claim because, remember, Lewis and Clark got really lost and ended up in Oregon when they were supposed to be going through the Louisiana Territory. So, now, 150,000 people start rushing into Oregon because of all the free land there. And they rush past all the free land in the Great Plains and all the free land that was over in Illinois and Missouri, and they go over to the free land that was in Oregon. So if you're looking, there's a lot of free land that was crossed to get to the free land in Oregon. This was a 6-month trip to go ahead and get through this territory. And this is where you start seeing all of these stories about the Wild West. About people dying, drowning, people going through breaking an arm or leg and it going septic and them dying. All the shootouts and all the stories about that we'll be talking about here pretty soon. A lot of it's a lot less interesting than what you're thinking. So, someone breaking their arm, and the most often the cure for a broken arm was amputation. So, anyway, the Plains Indians who lived in the Great Plains between the Louisiana Territory and the Oregon Territory, there were about 350,000 of them, and they had no problem with anyone that was going through the territory as long as you didn't try and build anything. If you built anything, that meant you were trying to steal their land, and that's whenever they got violent. But for the most part, they really didn't care when you were going through their territory. Now, the Donner Party, this is a little bit different. This is a group of 83 people that thought to themselves, we want to go from Independence, Missouri to Sutter's Fort in California and start our lives in California. And people thought, wow, this is a great idea. They start their travel and they get stuck in the mountains during winter and they ran out of food. Or did they? Having Phil over for dinner meant something a little bit different during that time. You know, I'm full. Did you have your fill? And Phil was dead. They ate Phil because they were cannibals. They were so desperate for food they started eating people. So yes, that happened, and so only 45 of the 83 people actually got there. Your wife looks rather sweet tonight. A chomp. I love what you're wearing, and I love what's underneath even more. Oh, Stuart. No, Stuart, a chomp. Different problems for a different time. It hasn't happened in 2020 yet, but remember, we still have about 5 more weeks left in the year, so, someone did bite my sister-in-law. Yeah. My wife's little sister, someone bit part of her face, Anyway, my aunts just would, pinch your face, and, some of these other people are going through and biting faces. Welcome to 2020. Now, we've heard the whole Texas story before, but now we're getting closer to having a fight. Okay, so Mexico threatened war with the United States if it tried to make Texas part of the United States. So, and Andrew Jackson said, no, we don't want any part of a war with Mexico. And, Martin Van Buren said, no, I don't think we're going to add Texas. William Henry Harrison, I don't think so. And then you get to John Tyler, who's like, you know what? I don't care about policy. I'm just interested in my youngest daughter's slightly younger friend. And that's all I care about. So let's make Texas part of the United States, and I'm not worried about anything else. Oh, Congress isn't working with us? So then let's get both houses of Congress together, and then we only need 50% plus 1 vote to add Texas. That's a way to cheat them through so that I can get away from this kind of duty and go back to going after my sweet little daughter's sweet little friend. By the way, this isn't like the Donner story. I'm not looking for cannibalism. I'm just looking to add 7 children to my collection of 9 children, so I have a total of 16 children. And as it was said, so was it done, and Texas became a state through a joint resolution. Now, the next part really has more to do with James Knox Polk. Because of people were crying in the streets. 5440 or fight. 5440 or fight. Actually, they were shouting it through the streets. Shouting it so loud that people died. Not because of the shouting, but people died. I mean, that's what people did back then. Okay? So, 5440 or fight, we will accept no other boundary. Ultimately, they settled at 49 degrees, so they split Oregon in half. So 5440 or fight was just kind of they were more words than they were actual actions. So, the election of 1844. You've got 2 people. You've got James Knox Polk, former Speaker of the House. He was a promise maker and a promise keeper. He promised to annex Texas, but by the time he became president, already part of the nation. He claimed Oregon at 5440, and he settled that border also. He promised only 1 term and didn't run for a second. He promised to lower the tariff, and the tariff was lowered. He promised to bring back the Treasury to bring some type of stable money supply, and he did stabilize the money supply during one term. And he also promised to acquire California, and by the end of his term, it was part of it. On the other side, you have Henry Clay, an extremely ugly man, someone who worked so hard their entire life to be president of the United States, and who failed to become president of the United States. It was actually kind of a close popular vote, but boy, did Polk just dominate the election. So, welcome, Polk, President number 11. Thank you, and welcome to the team. Probably a good president because he actually said what he said he was going to do. You can dislike people for a lot of things, but you can't hate him for that. You can't hate him for the mullet, though. He was the first president to have a mullet, and to this date, he is the only president to have a mullet. So, in presidential hair wear, we have some bald presidents in both the Adams boys. You have someone who looked like they had mange in Andrew Jackson. And, well, anyway. So now we have a mullet in office. And someone who obviously can't tie a tie if you look at the picture. Looks like he was like, I'll just wrap this around my neck and now my tie is complete. You're all thinking it. So, manifest destiny. Now, we have a very famous picture here of, well, let me tell you what manifest destiny is, and then we'll talk about the symbolism in the picture up above it. Okay? So, manifest destiny is basically the belief that God had ordained or commanded for the United States to stretch from the Atlantic to the Pacific. You all remember that part in the Bible. This is for atheists also, who can easily find the section that talks about, and yea, though the United States must stretch from the Atlantic to the Pacific, that the people fulfill the commandments of thine God. Henceforth, thus saith the Lord God, in the verse 4, chapter 8. So, if you don't believe me, just check out the verse that I had just explained, and you'll see where all of that's explained. Now, if you look at the picture, this symbolizes basically what has happened in the United States, and if you turn that into a map of the United States, and in a perfect world, what I would do is I would have a map of the United States kind of traced and set up over the top of this, but this is not a perfect world. This is a third world for this. So if you look at this represents the United States. And up on the top right hand side of the screen, okay, so if you put your watch there, it's kind of up where 1 and 2 would be on the, if you have like a normal watch. Up in the top right hand corner, that would be where Maine is, and Massachusetts and New York. The lightest area and the most advanced place, you can see all these ships that are there, the rivers, canals, the bridges, and the train. Okay, so that is the Northwest, the most modern. And the South, you have the farmers and you have people planting in their fields. Okay, so that would be the South, that would be Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. Okay, and you can see the sky is pretty bright behind them because this is where the white man has come, this is where the white man has modernized, and this is what the United States has done for the country. It is modern and it is great. And you can see the woman, the half-naked woman there, that is Lady Liberty. You might remember her from such statues as Statue of Liberty, where she holds up a torch and holds the book and is half-naked wearing a crown. Here she's just half-naked carrying the book, and she's got telegraph line, and she is bringing technology over to the West Coast. The West Coast, which is very untamed. And you can see that light travels with her because she's bringing civilization from the United States over to the West. And underneath her, you have the Wells Fargo coach. You have the Pony Express right around her knee, and the wagon. Okay, so you have, that's where everyone is. And as it goes further out into the west, up in the Northwest, you have the buffalo up in the Oregon Territory. and you have the savage Indians and the bear in California. So this is the symbol that we have for the new America. So we're going to talk about the causes of the Mexican War. So the first problem that you have is that Mexico is going to sever its relations with the United States after Texas is annexed. Okay? That's problem number one. So already Mexico is looking for a fight. Number two, the U.S. wanted California. Most of this was a desire of the U.S. to help establish and promote trade between the U.S. and Asia, particularly China. Mexico owed the U.S. somewhere around $3.25 million in debt. So the U.S. told them that they would forgive the debt if Mexico agreed to sell California to the United States. Mexico refused. The U.S. relented, or not relented, but they continued to pursue and push the issue. And this really caused major diplomatic problems between the U.S. and Canada and Mexico. So number three, James Knox Polk orders Zachary Taylor to cross the Nueces River. Whenever he does, he goes across with an army. The army runs into Mexican forces. There are 17 casualties on the U.S. side. So, as a result, the war's been initiated. Now, in truth, the U.S. has done this tactic before, but we always pretend like we don't understand. Not before this, but since this. And you can go to the Mexican War, or not the Mexican War, but the Spanish-American War, when we send the USS Maine, which is a U.S. battleship, to a Spanish territory right near the capital of the Spanish territory. And whenever it gets sunk, we get confused and we start a war. In Vietnam, the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, we have 2 U.S. destroyers that are off the coast of North Vietnam, a country that we had been threatening, a company that we'd been undermining, trying to get to overthrow. And we put 2 U.S. destroyers there. Shots are fired at the U.S. destroyers, and then, this is going to lead to the Vietnam War, and then to Japan in World War II, where we talk about the fact that we were attacked without any type of cause. Well, Japan wanted part of China, Manchuria, because of its natural resources. And the truth is that whenever Japan tries to invade so they can do the same thing the United States has done, the same thing Great Britain has done, we sink, or we don't sink, the Japanese sink one of our ships called the Buena. We get angry, we get up in arms, we threaten that we're going to go to war with them, and the Japanese apologize and we stop. So we kind of interfered with Japan beforehand, and also we stopped selling them jet fuel and scrap iron. So we did a lot to initiate even Japan in World War II. But we don't like to claim to be the aggressor because we want to show that we were victims, that we struck back as a result. So Zachary Taylor gets fired at, and now we have all the ammunition to go into war. Okay? So Polk goes before Congress, screaming out to Congress, American blood's been spilled on American soil. Lincoln asks him to show him where on a map, not on a mat. I guess if there'd been a Matthew there, they could have checked on him, but he asked where on a map American blood had been spilled. This really almost ends Lincoln's political career. He's laughed out of Congress. He's not able to be reelected. And from this point forward, he's kind of seen as a town joke. He can't even get a local election after this, and war is on. Now, the biggest problem with the United States going to war with Mexico was the fact that the U.S. had no standing army, a very small standing army. Mexico had just, had yet another revolution in the country and had many standing armies, and right now that was being controlled by the victor. Okay? So, the U.S. was outnumbered 7,000 to 32,000. And this is how the war starts. So, once again, in our short history, we've declared a war against another nation without having an army to really fight the war. So, Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, we've talked about him before, the leader of Mexico during Texas, and at one point he was the leader in 11 different time periods in Mexican history. He was exiled in Puerto Rico. He was there with his 16-year-old bride, who was 40 years his junior, and he contacted the U.S. and said, hey, if you help me go back to Mexico and I take over, then I will sell you California and we'll avoid bloodshed and there will be no war. So the U.S. helps him get into power, and whenever he gets there, instead of keeping his promise, he declares war. So, take that, U.S. You fell for the oldest trick in the book. Trust that I'm going to go take over a country and, keep the peace. Now, on an odd note, during World War I, Vladimir Lenin uses that same ploy to take over Russia, and whenever he takes over, he promised the Kaiser that he would end the war, and one of the first things he does whenever he takes over is end the war. So sometimes it does work, sometimes it doesn't, but you don't want to put all your horses in one basket. I mean, that's way too many eggs. So let's talk about California's pathetic attempt at nationhood. Everyone talks about the fact that California was its own nation, but in reality what happened was John C. Fremont was an American soldier who was in California, and he contacts the governor and asks if he wants to have breakfast. The governor says yes. They have breakfast, and at the end of breakfast he pulls out a gun and says, "You are now under arrest. I proclaim myself the leader of California," and he then goes ahead and jails the governor inside of his own house. They claim that it is its own nation and start what is really a very short-lived separate country. So one of the most interesting things about the Mexican-American War is the fact that as U.S. troops are going from city to city, from region to region, everyone warns them, you're welcome here, but don't go on any further because there's a big army waiting to destroy you. And the U.S. Army has told this several times, and at no point do we see the bigger army. Baja California, which is a little peninsula of land to the south of California, and by little I mean it stretches down pretty far, that surrendered itself to the United States on 3 separate occasions, once the Navy, once the Army, once the Marines, and at no point was it ever actually added to the United States. But the Mexican governor that was there tried to give the land several times to the U.S. Now Stephen Kearny is pushing his army through New Mexico, and again he's running the same thing. You're welcome here, we'll have a big party, but don't go any further because a big army will crush you. And he gets all the way to Santa Fe and captures Santa Fe without a single shot being fired. Now, Zachary Taylor, who crossed the Nueces River, which was north of the Rio Grande, he's ordered to guard the U.S. border. He's told, don't go anywhere, make sure you hold that border because on the other side of you, the closest army is in St. Louis and New Orleans, so they could take all of Texas and a lot of other U.S. territory easily before we're able to order a counterattack. Zachary Taylor decides he's not going to follow orders, invades Mexico anyway, and runs into a force of Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna's men that outnumbers him by 4 times. And this is the Battle of Buena Vista. And the battle looks like it's going really bad for him, but they're being ordered to go back to defend different areas of Mexico from U.S. troops. And what should have been a rout by the Mexican army turns into a victory for Zachary Taylor, who looks like a military genius from this point. So, Winfield Scott, in a move that makes him look even more brilliant, decides that he is going to invade Mexico. Now, on an interesting note or boring note, several of the men that are with him become really great generals during the Civil War, including Ulysses S. Grant, Robert E. Lee, George McClellan, Ambrose Burnside, and several other important leaders that served Winfield Scott directly. They ended up moving through Mexico really without any type of conflict at all until they get right at the outskirts of Mexico. Now, at Chapultepec, there was a group of boys that were between the ages of 10 and 14 who were told, hold this position. If you don't hold this position, the American army's going to march through here. They're going to rape and murder everyone. You are our only hope to protect the lives and virtue of all these Mexicans that lie behind you. These boys at Chapultepec throw out a ferocious attack, do everything in their power and more to try and hold out against the American forces, but they're not trained. They're going against the greatest military commander that existed at the time, and very well trained colonels and corporals and captains underneath them that would serve in the Civil War, and they crush these boys. And in an act of shame, several of them will fling themselves off of a cliff to their death. These young boys are known as Los Héroes de Chapultepec. Winfield Scott marches into the city to a parade that honors him for what he's done. He is so well loved in Mexico that whenever he tries to leave, the Mexican government at the time offers him leadership of the country, and he smiles, makes some type of comment like that's really cute, and then leaves. So, since the United States controlled Mexico City, ultimately, we controlled all of Mexico. So then comes the interesting question. Since we control the capital city, we control Mexico, why not take all of Mexico? Now, many people were against this because of all the Mexican men. You may not know this, but we live in a racist country. But Sam Houston says, you should check out my new wife. She's Mexican, and there's a lot of reasons why you might want to invade a country like this. And the congressmen really are interested in what he has to say because they're dirty old men. And so right whenever they're getting to the point where they're deciding that maybe they should take all of it, peace breaks out. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. And this stops the annexation of all of Mexican territory. See, Nicholas Trist was sent down to negotiate a treaty with Mexico before the war really started. He gets there and the peace talks are really, really slow. He's given certain parameters that he's supposed to put in, but it's one of those things where he continues to push and continues to push. James Knox Polk gets really tired of waiting, gets angry, and fires Trist. Now, unlike most people that get fired, Trist doesn't go home, but he continues to work for a peace treaty between the U.S. and Mexico. And he gets one kind of at the last moment. So, in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, there's no more fighting. And in return, the U.S. is going to take the Mexican cession. Now, this is California, Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, and Colorado, and part of Wyoming. And all of these territories are ceded to the United States for $15 million and for giving $3.25 million in debt. So, sometimes you can get a Mexico cheaper than other times. So, results of the Mexican War. Number one, you have a total of 13,000 U.S. casualties. Remember, a casualty is dead or wounded. Now, of these 13,000, 11,550 were because of dysentery. Basically, our troops had diarrhea so bad they weren't able to go and fight. Okay. Number two, this gives experience to generals like Lee, Jackson, McClellan, Meade, and Grant. Number three, this very action makes all of the Latin American countries not trust the United States because at any point the U.S. could decide to go in and steal land from them. And finally, number four, there's major issues that are going to rise over the question of what to do with slavery in new territories. I'd like to thank everyone for patiently and attentively going to class today. I hope everyone has a great day. I'll see all of you soon. Be safe, but don't be a safe. Doug Dull out.